I've been in business for a long time, but in IT for over 20 years, and particularly in the last 18 months, I've never seen so many people compromise. And the boss sends them off an email and says, pay this invoice. And 9 times out of 10, people pay the invoice because it's coming from their boss. What they don't actually realise is they've actually been hacked.
You do quite a range of services. What would be some of the core managed IT services that you offer New Zealand businesses?
Yeah, so we've got infrastructure as a service, which has been around for a long time, but we do have our own fully managed platform on an enterprise back end, along with a platform as a service model, which is quite bespoke to our business. That's where businesses, it's a bit of a differentiator, where businesses with bespoke applications that won't work so well over a WAN or won't work so well in the cloud can actually work on our platforms as a service. So that's, I guess, a unique offering that CNX can offer. There's been a big push in security, which has been a topic this year and for many years, really, to be fair, which over the last probably 2 years, CNX as a business developed a security platform and a dedicated security practice. So as a managed offering now, we've got security as a service. That's been really popular, particularly these last 9 months, where people can turn on and off security services as they want for their business, based on their business growing or having to decrease, given the different circumstances they're facing. So really paying for what they're getting only when they need it.
What would be your message to New Zealand manufacturers? There's around 1,500 businesses that are New Zealand-made license holders, including Computer Network, CNX as well. You came on board a couple of months ago. What would be the message around things that maybe you're very aware of in that security space that maybe manufacturers and makers aren't necessarily as aware of because they're too busy trying to get the widget out the door and sell it, rather than thinking about operational security, which is kind of invisible and you don't really think about until something bad happens?
Yeah, there's security threats are very real at the moment. You would have seen a lot of it in the media, the NZX, a lot of large companies actually affecting New Zealanders in general. But I'd say in the last 18 months, I've been in business for a long time, but in IT for over 20 years, and particularly in the last 18 months, I've never seen so many more compromises across businesses in the top of the south in New Zealand and also across New Zealand. So that's been, it's always been talked about, but it's actually a real thing affecting businesses almost on a weekly basis. So and particularly around compromising identity. So users' credentials, users' passwords, users' usernames, as we're becoming more cloud and cloud focused, and having a little bit on premise, but you might have your email in the cloud with Microsoft, or you might have some storage with Amazon, or you might be utilizing some Google services. So you're not protected by one firewall or one perimeter anymore, which is the old sort of legacy style security. You really do need to have that cloud-based protection, and that's where you come into your cybersecurity side of things. So particularly accounts getting compromised, email accounts getting compromised, the hackers or the people in the background, the bad people, setting up roles which will forward emails or forward particular content and subject matter off to their account. So they could be sitting on your account just sniffing and waiting for 3 months or 6 months, waiting for a certain transaction or for certain words to pop up, and then they jump in and start interpreting then what a company thinks is actually their distributor or their reseller or their partner they generally deal with. And they're getting smarter and better in the way they do that. So that's where your cyber security comes in. Critical to have it, and it's happening every day, and every week. There's other ones where cyber threats will be out there and they'll be interpreted to be their boss. And their boss sends them off an email and says, pay this invoice. 9 times out of 10, people pay the invoice because it's coming from their boss. What they don't actually realise is they've actually been hacked. So very real life scenarios, and they're getting more sophisticated in the way they do it. So it looks very real.
I've got 2 stories that highlight both of those examples. One is firsthand, one is secondhand. I'll start with the second-hand one. A manufacturing business, they had their email hacked. He didn't even know. And it wasn't until, I think it was 4 or 5 months later, when his father passed away, that the hackers got in between and started posing as the manufacturer to say to one of the suppliers, look, we can't pay you. And then what he did is took the money and put it into a different account. So said it's going to be a delay paying, which then silenced the alarm bells in one area. So this hacker could then make the right transaction and mediate as if he was the actual boss. And they lost a lot of money. That was it was under $1 million, but it was over $100,000.
Yeah.
And they were very cunning with it. Do you think there's is it a small group of people, or is it a large amount? You're saying you're seeing at the top of the South Island at least one compromised business a week. Where are they coming from?
The actual attackers, it's global. So that's where, we've seen one with a law firm where there was actually a transaction of 340,000, and we stopped that literally going through within about 2 hours before the settlement was about to finish. And that happened to be changes in their records from India that happened in early hours of that morning. So some of these things could be sitting dormant for 6 months or a year. This one, in this case, was very quick, very sophisticated, and happened all within the space of 8 hours. We stopped it with 2 hours to go. So that's a very real life scenario, and that was a local firm for 340,000. But yeah, so I guess the threats are everywhere. They're coming from overseas. Typically, they're coming from overseas. So there are security measures you can put in place, like conditional access. Absolutely, I think should be mandatory across all of our client base and across all clients. And that'll pretty much protect New Zealand as a country from outside hackers. So that it cuts off the rest of the world from hacking in. And then other mandatory things in the cyberspace is multi-factor authentication. The banks have been doing it for years. We've been talking about it for a little while, but it's only been the compromises that have been happening in the last 12 months in particular, and with COVID coming on affecting people and getting more mobile. Multi-factor authentication to me should be mandatory. It's not hard to set up. It's an easy thing to get in place, get across the line, and to me, if you've got those two simple things in place, that'll protect your business from a lot of different areas.
Yeah, I think you're entirely right. And I know it gives me a peace of mind knowing that if I need to log into certain applications that have a higher degree of security, I have to have this physical phone device because it's sending a text message. And surely it's not foolproof, but it's not about being 100%. It's just being about more secure than other weaker targets. So people move on and we'll start targeting somewhere else. What does that mean for a business, though? Because I think from my own telecoms days, it used to be you put a WatchGuard firewall in, or you maybe have a Cisco iOS firewall software build on your router, and you knew that was your physical, your ring fence of your environment. Whereas now, as you said, with all these cloud-based solutions, you can't go start putting boxes in Google or in your payroll system's cloud-based solution. Does that mean that there's more responsibility now on employees, that it's more everyone's job rather than just the IT manager, or are you empowering the IT manager with new tools?
I think it's a real mix, and I think it's a collaboration exercise. So the businesses need to be led and directed. So they need to trust their IT team, internal team, or it could be their IT partner, outsourcing partner. They need to trust and be advised by those people. That's their profession, and that's what they should be getting updated on every day, and they should be sitting with the business, understanding the business, and advising the latest security measures that need to be put across for that particular business. But it is a collaboration exercise, so you can set up test scenarios that staff inside the business don't know you're doing, where you can send out fake emails controlled in a controlled environment from the IT team, which test to go, right, which one of your employees are constantly clicking on our links? Which ones are constantly going to external sites? And from that, you can actually go, okay, well, it's typically these X number of users and staff, which are going to be the ones that are most likely to click on threats that are coming in or to activate threats. So not only training the whole team and the whole business and constantly doing that, but you'll focus on these typical sort of users which tend to be clicking on all the links and causing most of the trouble. So there's that internal training, very much an awareness thing. So regular updates to your team and to people. But when it comes to IT, and you talked about your firewall and your traditional box, and so most environments should be or would have some type of hybrid environment. Where they would have a touch of cloud IT, they would have maybe a touch of on-premise IT, and then maybe a little bit of private or public cloud IT or private cloud IT, which is in, so for example, a managed service environment. So therefore, the firewall still is prevalent to some degree. You still need your antivirus on your endpoints and antivirus on your servers, so some of that traditional IT security. But you also need to advance into the cloud side of things. So we've talked about multi-factor authentication, we've talked about conditional access. Becoming all your external records need to be looked at and becoming a better internet citizen. So things like a little bit of IT geek, but your DMARC records, your DKIM records, your SPF records, those all need to be updated and need to be relevant to become a good internet citizen. There's things you could have, a black box almost, if you think of it like in an aeroplane, a black box sitting on your network, constantly looking and sniffing for threats. So you might see some admin credentials that have been hacked. You might see some anomalies or some vulnerabilities happening on the network. So that's in a type of black box scenario. That is actually one of our service offerings that we've developed over the last year, quite bespoke to CNX, but it just sits there really being your 24/7 security sort of watchguard person, constantly sniffing and looking around the network for areas where threats may have entered. There's
I like that black box idea because that it's capturing some of the things that you may not necessarily see if you just have your operational IT environment, because you're setting something up there almost like a dumb environment for someone to poke and prod on, and it's going to log that poke or that prod. I was seeing through COVID that there was a group of young kids that decided they wanted to see how far they could get into Apple, because Apple provides like a 6-figure reward if you can get into their systems. And so a group of them thought, well, we're going to be locked down. Why don't we start to pool our understanding, our tech understanding of how we get into systems? And it didn't take them long to get a basic level of administrator rights through some very edge case educational piece of software. But within the 3 months, they got into the core of Apple's logistics, transportation, their warehousing for the Apple iPhone. It took them another month on top of that, and they got into the iOS source code for future versions. And they said, all right, that's it, we've gone too far. So this, I guess the point I'm making here is, even if you have really good in-house security IT, there's always more you can be doing, and sometimes taking a second opinion can elevate or at least give you a different view on what you think you should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just leverage, or just sort of following on from what you're saying there is, from all the internal systems as well that you have and the checks and balances that you have in place, is you need to have those alerting and monitoring back to a team like a service desk or a function where they're actually actioned. So a lot of it will be automated, and you can fix it on the fly, and the systems will be set up to auto quarantine or auto fix, or but also there are going to be some tasks which actually need a service desk action and function straight away. So to have that real-time 24/7 alerting and monitoring going back to a service desk is really critical as well, so that they can actually action certain tasks.
For the listeners who have been listening to Paul and I go quite deep onto security straight off, I usually wouldn't do this. I'd usually start with productivity and how that helps grow revenue and reduce your costs. But I just see after COVID that with the amount of intellectual property sitting in New Zealand manufacturing businesses, it definitely needs protecting, and it needs organisations to take it seriously. But if we do move on to the productivity side, Paul, and the founding of computer networks, what are some of the things that businesses can do when they put in a system that you provide? maybe a case study or a customer example, what type of productivity gains are you likely to get from it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the key thing that we want our businesses to be able to do is solely focus on their business. So not have to worry about IT, not have to worry about unpredictable costs or any spikes in costs. Give them peace of mind so that they can actually sleep at night and focus, on their business activities, which people want to be able to, knowing that the back end stuff is actually being looked after. So a lot of that comes back to building trust, and trust doesn't just happen overnight. It's listening, taking the time to listen to your clients and listen to the actual businesses. It's really critical the IT team gets to know how the business runs and all different areas of the business and the different functions. If you don't know how the business runs, there's no way that you can provide the bespoke and detailed IT operations that you need. IT will always have an answer, but you just need to sit down, take the time, listen to all areas of the business, and then cater it to what the client actually needs. Which is something, I guess, when you go back 20 years ago in IT, it wasn't done a lot. Nowadays, particularly for what we focus on, CNX, is that consulting and just sitting down and listening, building strong relationships. But even taking a step back from that, and what we've done in particular from CNX over the last 3 or 4 years is spent a lot of time building our own team. It's been a real detailed process to get the right people. So CNX, when you look at us 3 or 4 years ago, we were only about 5 people. We were quite tiny. We've now built up to 15 professionals, and we're continuing to grow. So that's been a lot of time of selecting the right people around the country, the right people locally, and we've even had to get a couple of people internationally to fit the right skill sets of what our clients across the top of the south, but also nationally require and need. So that's come from listening to our clients, and then you build the team around that. You get the right team in place, and then sit down with clients, get a good strategy in place, and implement it. And at the end of the day, you just get it done.
What's it like for hiring good talent from Nelson, right? Because Wellington's kind of known as the tech hub. Auckland's got some pretty big businesses, so has economies of scale. What's it like in Nelson? I mean, I guess you've got the weather to attract people, but
everyone goes on about sunshine hours. And I think 20 years ago or 15 years ago, there was a bit of truth to that. Obviously, the climate is a big factor, and that does attract certain people. The lifestyle's fantastic, a lot of outdoor stuff. The hills are, you're working in town and you're walking and running up the hills within, 3 or 4 minutes. Everything's really close and accessible. Traffic's pretty light, it's pretty good. But where I think things have really changed in the last 10 years is wages and salary has become more competitive. Everyone used to think, Nelson, you'd go along there and you get paid by the sunshine hours, but you do get the sunshine hours, but typically firms and companies are looking after their employees a lot better, and being able to afford that. And I guess that comes down to a bit of globalization or a bit of nationalization, where you can reach out to other revenues and streams across the country, not just sitting within your own little bubble. So that allows us to pay your staff a better, look after your staff a better. Flexibility is really key. Flexible working hours, and I guess just taking the time out to listen to your staff is really important, and catering to their needs as well, because we're all in it together. We're all in the company together. It's about us as a team, sort of moving and developing and where we're heading. So listening to them, taking their thoughts and ideas on board, they feel part of the company, which is really important, and then we're all on this journey together to get to where we need to.
What's some of the tech that your team's really excited about at the moment that is either you've just launched it, or it's things you're working on at the moment that you think is going to shift the needle for business?
Yeah, absolutely. So a big area is in the modern desktop space. So we're spending a lot of time looking at various different platforms and how we can utilize and better implement and provide a modern desktop experience for our clients. So that's allowing them to, if people don't know what a modern desktop is, but to work anywhere from any time from a mobile device and to move amongst different devices. So you might have a notebook, you could have a phone, you could have an iPad, and to easily streamline between any platform anywhere. You could be up in Auckland, you could be down in Invercargill, and still working what feels like from the same office or in the same premise as you typically would be, or working from home. So it's getting that whole modern desktop platform. A number of our guys have spent a lot of time getting skilled and qualified in that area, so we've invested quite a bit in there. Automation is another area, so we do quite a bit in getting more involved in your Power BI and your workflows, and getting those mundane tasks where you have a bit of paper here, a process here, and the person's got to click a button over here, and removing that from firms so that they can actually spend their staff time making money for their business rather than spending it on a mundane task. So a lot of automation, a lot of workflows, and you would have heard of your SharePoint and your team space and OneDrive. They're linking really nicely together. An area which we're spending more time in is particularly Teams, and we've got a lot of skilled people in that in SharePoint, and telephony within Teams. So as a business, we moved across to Microsoft Teams calling about 6 months ago. As far as I know, we're one of the first sort of companies to go across to that in the top of the south. It's worked really well for us. Now we get a lot of our clients wanting us to implement that for them. So that's a real game changer. Security we touched on before, that's been massive, and that's going to continue evolving and growing. But for me, around the security space, it's more knowing that our clients are in a good space so that I can actually sleep at night. Because we're seeing threats, and we don't want our clients compromised, and that's where these are the sort of things that keep me up as a business owner and a managing director, making sure that at the end of the day, my clients are safe. They've been able to do their business anytime, anywhere, and it's an ever-changing world. It moves pretty quickly, and you have to be dynamic. You have to be nimble. You have to be able to change when level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 comes pretty quickly.
Completely right. And although this time of year is really focusing on sales in the run up to Christmas for a lot of businesses, I'd certainly suggest to those business owners, come January, when there's a little bit more downtime, start thinking about what's the IT strategy for your next year, and balancing those two things out. One that you mentioned, of course, is the security side of it, but also the productivity part. And you talked about automation there. There are so many menial tasks that teams of people don't want to do, but don't know a better way of doing it. And sometimes it just takes an IT professional or someone who understands how you can automate, not without ripping everything out, but just there's tools out there, at least in the marketing space. There's over 8,000 software platforms just for marketing. And unlike the old days where here's your standard service, now it's about dealing with professionals that know when to pick and choose and combine to avoid having custom code written to replace some of the manual work. We've certainly, internally at Buy New Zealand Made, just used the automation to remove the need to do some really basic tasks. So when you got that welcome pack, there's no communication. We're not sending it out. That's someone who gets an automated spreadsheet in the printing side of it for the certificates. Then we've got someone else that couriers that out, does all the picking and packing, and then that goes into our accounting system. And that's productivity that saves us money that could then go into other services, like what you've just suggested, Paul, on the security side.
Yeah, absolutely. And just evolving on what you're saying there. So that comes down to, there's a couple of key points I want to touch on here, is the IT provider understanding the business and seeing parts of the business that technology can improve. So a lot of clients, let's take Microsoft, for example, will be using some type of Microsoft suite or a Microsoft licensing package. Now, the IT provider in any of these license package, there could be anywhere from 10 to sort of 20 or 30 different types of technology the client can use. At any one time, they might only be using 5 or 8 of them inside these packages. So it's up to the IT provider to determine, well, there is actually this automation package that you're already paying for, and this is how it's going to benefit your business, and this is how we can streamline these just by implementing it and turning them on and making the workplace count. So that comes down to a real relationship and getting that advice and direction. part of that comes back to, you touched on before, the IT strategy. So part of our model with all of our clients is to do an IT strategy and a refresh of that every 12 to 18 months, as well as ongoing monthly account management meetings as and when the client feels fit. But inside those IT strategies, it's not only a big spring clean and where we're sort of heading over the next 12 to 24 to 36 months inside that strategy, but it's also the opportunity to get under the hood again and look at different workflows and the different licensing packages that they've got available and how that's going to all tie together and ultimately make their business a better place and more profitable.
You touched on before, and I didn't pick up on it, and I wanted to, is the BI side, the business intelligence side. I've seen one organisation on my visits around manufacturers who had it wasn't BI, it wasn't one of the Microsoft products, but it was a Raspberry Pi and custom coded visibility on these LCD screens, so the workers in the manufacturing could see what the error rate was, what the throughput was. So it was real-time data working with people to inform what should be happening next. Can you explain some of the power of the BI tools and how it can be potentially leveraged?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so part of the BI tools is getting that real-time intelligence. And from that, you can get the proper dashboarding, the proper widgets. That's real-time to decision makers, to operational managers, to people that can make these decisions based on real-time as well. But more importantly, the trending analysis that comes from these tools as well. So, forecasting 1 month, 3 months, 6 months out with accurate real-time information. That information is only as good as the structure that you've got in behind all of these automated tools. So really key to have a single source of information, so a master database, and all of your different business tools talking back to this master database, so you can then get your BI tools, extracting data and the information it needs, put into these dashboards and widgets for real time, but more importantly going forward and dashboarding. Another area where you're talking about, leveraging sort of BI and a little bit of artificial intelligence, and one thing we're doing for one of our larger clients in the region is around the HoloLens. And that's the virtual goggles, and where you can work with anyone globally that has the same technology that they're using at the other end. And literally, you could have in the case that we're looking at using it for this client, they'll have a professional based in Nelson, and they'll be talking to various different people all around the world and directing them what to do with their mechanics by their using their hands, using blueprints and what they call remote assist, or a part of the Dynamics 365 package. And it is very much, those futuristic movies you see on TV and people moving stuff around and that you see on Mission Impossible. Those things are actually happening in today's world. And the things like Microsoft HoloLens, you have a look at it, it's great. And these are things that we're excited about getting involved in. It's new for us. It's new for New Zealand. But to have businesses right inside our region here looking at that, and that can absolutely change the way that they do business, because they won't have to, they can't fly overseas at the moment. They used to send people around the world. They can't. So this HoloLens technology could be an absolute game changer.
And it's great to hear that, it is 2020, and for a couple of decades now, the internet and IT has been separate from the real world. I think social media and Netflix has helped bridge the two, rightly or wrongly. But now we're seeing these tools where the real world, the internet is bleeding into the real world. And so there's real advantages to be having that. It's called HoloLens, is it? Is that the technology?
HoloLens, yeah.
HoloLens.
If anyone Googles Microsoft HoloLens, then they'll see exactly what I mean.
Excellent. A question I haven't asked you, Paul, and I do want to ask is, you've been in IT for a long time. I think 19, 20 years, 2001, you founded the company, which in web years is more like 80 years of technology refreshes. What keeps you passionate about it?
I'd have to say it's the people. Absolutely. The people I work with, the people in my team. So with CNX, just a little bit of an update there. So the person originally by the name of Duncan founded it, believe it or not. So he founded it, but I've been in business at CNX for some time and now fully own the company. But yeah, I'd have to say absolutely people. Working with clients, and I can hand on heart saying that, I like seeing a business evolve and the clients change based on the direction and the help that we're actually able to provide. There's nothing better seeing, a business that have got 10 users in an archaic state, and then, you fast forward 4 or 5 years, they've grown up to 20 staff or 30 staff. Their platform's just humming along, running beautifully, focusing 100% on their business. And to know that you've actually played a little part in that, to me, is actually quite special. And that's what makes me tick is again, across the top of the South, we're walking down the street and we're bumping into our clients all over the show. So it's nice to be able to sit down, have a beer, have a coffee with them, and to sincerely say, we're doing the best thing we can for you. And they're turning around going, well, hopefully they say you're doing a bloody good job. and that really keeps me going, keeps me passionate. But also the team that I've got, and we've got a great group of people. They're very, very special. And, we get to know all their partners and all of their family and their kids, and we have functions throughout the year and like to have family get-together days. So to be able to know that I've got a part to play in their life and to see them progress and see their kids grow up and their kids develop, and then as people develop and to be able to provide a good lifestyle for them, really comes down to those 2 key areas, and that's what keeps me going. IT is a tool set, it's our ship, it's what we do. I love it, I'm passionate about it, but ultimately it's about the people.
It has to be, and it's fantastic that Nelson has your expertise and skills at hand. You talk about the top of the South. How big is your region? So if someone's listening to this in Christchurch or in Auckland, is that in your zone? Like, do you do nationwide networks, or how do you position yourself there?
Yeah, so we do want to be the best IT provider across the whole top of the South. So that's looking at your Marlborough, your Nelson, and your Tasman regions. It's very common for us to have a client who's got a premise or a head office or some type of presence in the top of the South, but they might have 5 or 6 offices around the country. So it is quite common that, we're dealing with businesses in Christchurch, Queenstown, Dunedin, Wellington, Auckland, West Coast, all over the show. So typically they might have a presence of some type in Nelson, doesn't have to be they. So yeah, and we also have some clients that will have a presence here, but also have presences internationally. So it does reach quite far, but we are quite passionate also about doing the best thing for all the top of the South, but also extends to the country and just doing the right thing for us.
You've got some big companies that are headquartered out of Nelson or have some big manufacturing. I've been to there's Tallies there that do ice cream, the seafood just out of Motueka. I've been to Gold Pine, who do the R&D and innovation behind the furniture in their retail stores nationwide. What other businesses are kind of typical for the Nelson, Tasman, top of the South region?
Yeah, so it is very big. You touched on it, the seafood side of things. So, you your Sea Lords and your King Salmons and your Tallies. So I think it's the largest seafood port or fishing port in Australasia, I believe. So yeah, but I mean, very big in forestry, engineering and manufacturing. They're very large verticals. There's really developing businesses which are leading technology ones around the DC equipment. They're leading edge in forestry safety. Incredible. There's obviously there's quite a few banks across the banking sectors and bits and pieces there. The health and education. Different verticals as well, but it is quite diverse. It used to be a bit more of the primary sort of agriculture, horticulture, and that side of it, but it really has diversed over the last 20 years to be evenly spread across a number of different verticals. Obviously very big in horticulture and agriculture, and in our world famous hops and that side of things out Motueka way. But yeah, as a whole region, I'd say having that diversity has certainly strengthened the place. We're getting a lot of businesses. You would have heard of ones like Shuttle Rock. They're in the technology game, but sort of do a lot on Facebook and Twitter and the video ads on here. So they've got a head office here, but they've got branches all around the world. So a lot of firms are saying, because of the ease of technology and how it can make you work from anywhere. Actually putting your head offices here and working from here because of the lifestyle, because of the good people that are in our region, and you know, the easy access to the beaches and the hills and the mountain biking tracks and that. But being able to actually run your business from here, but it could be on a national or global scale.
And that's been a recurring theme with the people I've talked to from software services and technology, is being in regional hubs where it's a great lifestyle has a number of different benefits. You know, one from business perspective, there's less churn. It's not as expensive to buy the $1 million houses that are in Auckland and Wellington, so people can have a family and a lifestyle. But also you've got people that have chosen to work for you. They haven't chosen to fly to London or Silicon Valley. So you've got someone that's going to be with you for some time, and that's great if you're the client, because that person who did your IT strategy or audit 3 or 4 years ago is still there and is still the one that's seeing it through. And no matter how much documentation you do, it's great to have that same person involved with you when on the client side of it. Look, is there anything else, Paul, that you want to add before we finish up?
I think we've certainly covered a lot of good areas. I guess going forward, when I look at the uncertain times, just make sure you're for everyone out there, surround yourself with good people, have a good team of people, have good clients. Ultimately look after each other. It's going to be a testing year next year, no doubt. So we're all in it together. Let's be kind to each other, support each other, and no doubt we'll get through it really strong. We're pretty resilient, us Kiwis, and just I guess ultimately be kind and be good to each other. Yeah.
It's a great message. I appreciate your time today, Paul, and thank you for sharing a bit more on what you do. Certainly, once we get this podcast and the video edited, I'll send it out to a couple of the businesses that are New Zealand-made license holders in that top of the South region, talking about the productivity side of it and also the security side. I think that could be 2 paths in for you to maybe some new work for the early part of next year.
Oh, fantastic. And on behalf of myself and the whole team at CNX here, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and wish you all the best going forward as well. Thank you.